The silence of heaven has become so deafening that you have started to wonder if God has forgotten your address, your name, and every single desperate prayer you have ever whispered into the void. You have been faithful. You have been consistent. You have shown up to prayer with tears streaming down your face. And yet the heavens above you remain sealed shut like impenetrable brass. Your words seem to evaporate before they even leave your lips, dissolving into a silence so thick and suffocating that you can barely breathe under the weight of divine absence that haunts you. The God who once spoke to you so clearly, who once moved so powerfully in your life, now seems to have withdrawn into a mystery that your desperate heart cannot decode, no matter how hard you try. You have fasted, you have worshipped, you have repented for sins you are not even sure you committed, searching frantically for whatever offense must have caused this unbearable distance between you and your Father. The enemy has been whispering that you have finally exhausted the patience of God, that your failures have accumulated into a mountain so high that even divine mercy cannot climb over it to reach you anymore. Every night you lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every mistake, every stumble, every moment of weakness, convinced that somewhere along the way you disqualified yourself from heaven's attention and blessing. The loneliness of this silent season has become more painful than any rejection you have ever faced from human beings, because this feels like cosmic abandonment from the only one who truly knows your heart. You watch others receive their breakthroughs, their answered prayers, their miraculous testimonies, and you smile on the outside while your soul screams on the inside, wondering why God has seemingly passed you by completely. But what you are interpreting as divine abandonment is actually divine preparation. And the silence you fear is not punishment, but rather the sacred cocoon where your transformation is taking place in the hidden realm. Let me reveal to you the mystery of God's silence that the enemy desperately does not want you to understand. Because once you grasp this truth, you will never again mistake preparation for rejection. When God goes silent, it is almost never because he has stopped working, but rather because he has started working on something so massive that it requires your complete stillness to accomplish it. There are dimensions of glory and levels of promotion that cannot be birthed in the noise and distraction of constant communication. They require the womb of silence to be properly formed and developed. God's silence is not his absence. It is his focused attention on building something in the spiritual realm that your natural eyes cannot yet perceive, but your spirit knows is monumentally significant. The architect does not explain every detail to the foundation while the building is being constructed. The foundation simply trusts the process and holds its position while the master builder does his complex work. You are in a season where God is rearranging systems, realigning relationships, repositioning opportunities, and reconstructing pathways that will all suddenly converge at the appointed moment of your supernatural breakthrough and elevation. The reason you cannot hear him is because he is not currently in front of you speaking. He is behind the scenes of your life, moving pieces that you did not even know existed on your behalf. Every closed door you have been crying about was actually God's protection in disguise, keeping you from opportunities that looked like blessings but would have destroyed everything he is building for your future. The relationships that walked away during this silent season were not losses to grieve. They were divine subtractions that had to occur before the supernatural additions could safely enter your sacred space and calling. God allowed this silence because he needed to get you alone, away from every voice that was competing for the attention that belongs exclusively to Him and His purpose for your life. In the noise, you were too distracted to notice the subtle redirections He was trying to make. So He turned down the volume on everything until only the sound of your own breathing remained in the stillness. This is not cruelty. This is divine strategy employed by a Father who loves you too much to let you settle for temporary comfort when eternal significance is waiting just beyond this silent threshold. The wilderness seasons in Scripture were never punishment for the righteous. They were always incubators where ordinary people were transformed into history makers through the painful beauty of isolation and dependency. Your wilderness may feel like exile, but it is actually the intensive training ground where faith muscles are developed that could never be strengthened in the comfortable environment of constant confirmation and visible blessing. God trusts you with this silence because He knows your faith has matured enough to endure the mystery without abandoning the mission. Even when every natural indicator suggests that heaven has forgotten you, lesser believers would have quit by now. Lesser hearts would have turned back to Egypt months ago. But you are still here, still praying, still believing, which proves exactly why God chose you. The enemy wants you to interpret this season as evidence of your unworthiness. But heaven sees this season as confirmation of your selection for an assignment that requires uncommon preparation and supernatural endurance. What breaks most people is exactly what God is using to build you, because the very pressure that feels like destruction is actually the compression process that creates diamonds out of ordinary carbon. Stop begging God to remove you from the very crucible that He specifically designed to purify your gifts, strengthen your character, and prepare your vessel for the weight of glory that is coming. The breakthrough you are praying for would crush you if it came right now, because the current version of you does not have the infrastructure to sustain the magnitude of what God has planned. Look carefully at the life of Joseph, who spent 13 years in a silence so profound that he must have wondered countless times if the dreams God gave him were cruel jokes rather than divine promises. From the pit to Potiphar's house to the prison cell, Joseph experienced level after level of isolation, each one deeper and darker than the one before, with no visible evidence that God was orchestrating anything. But every silent year was a seminary of character development, teaching Joseph the administrative skills, the emotional intelligence, and the humble authority that would be required to save entire nations from starvation. The same brothers who threw Joseph into the pit of silence were the same brothers who eventually bowed before his throne, proving that God was working during every moment when it seemed like He was absent. Consider David, who was anointed king as a teenager, but then spent the next 15 years running for his life in caves and wildernesses, with no visible manifestation of the promise that had been spoken over him. David wrote his most powerful psalms not in the palace during seasons of celebration, but in the caves during seasons of silence, when his only company was darkness, fear, and the faint whisper of faith. Those cave seasons produced the worship that still ministers to millions of broken hearts thousands of years later, proving that what God produces in your silence will outlast what others produce in their spotlight. The silence taught David to trust without seeing, to praise without feeling, to believe without evidence, and these became the very qualities that made him a man after God's own heart and a king of legend. Even Jesus, the Son of God Himself, experienced 30 years of silence before 3 years of ministry, proving that the hidden years always outnumber the public years in God's economy of preparation. If the perfect Son of God required 3 decades of silent preparation for 3 years of world-changing ministry, what makes you think your assignment would require any less intensive development and patient formation? The Garden of Gethsemane reveals the most profound example of divine silence in all of Scripture, where Jesus prayed until his sweat became like drops of blood falling to the ground beneath him. 3 times Jesus asked for the cup to pass from him, and 3 times heaven responded with absolute silence, because some prayers are not answered with words, but with the strength to endure what is coming. The Father did not abandon the Son in that garden. The Father was preparing the Son for the cross that would redeem humanity, and that preparation required a silence that words could not fill. When Jesus cried out from the cross, asking why he had been forsaken, he was experiencing the ultimate silence, so that you and I would never have to be truly forsaken by God, ever. Your silent season is covered by his silent season. Your unanswered prayers are held by the one whose prayer in the garden was answered not with removal, but with resurrection power beyond the suffering. The same God who was silent while his Son hung on the cross was the same God who shook the earth, split the veil, and raised Jesus from the dead on the 3rd day of glory. If God can bring resurrection from the silence of the tomb, then he can certainly bring breakthrough from the silence of your current season of waiting, weeping, and desperate wondering. The tomb was silent for 3 days, but on the 3rd day the silence was shattered by the most powerful declaration in human history, when death was defeated and the grave lost its grip forever. Your silent season has an expiration date that has already been written on heaven's calendar. And when that day arrives, everything that felt dead in your life will suddenly spring forth with resurrection power. Hold your position, maintain your posture of faith, keep your hands lifted even when you feel nothing, because what is happening in the invisible realm is about to manifest in undeniable, visible breakthrough. Stop begging for seats at tables that God is preparing to flip over. Stop crying over doors that God himself has nailed shut. Stop mourning relationships that heaven is protecting you from with divine restraining orders. The people who do not see your value are not your assignment, and the doors that remain closed despite your knocking are not your destiny. So release them and turn your attention to what God is actually building. During this silence, build your altar in the secret place, where no one watches, no one applauds, and no one validates what you are doing except the Father who sees what is done in hiddenness. Your public ministry will only be as powerful as your private devotion. And God has given you this silent season to develop depths of intimacy that busy seasons would never allow you to cultivate. Stop scrolling through other people's highlight reels, comparing their visible success to your invisible process, because you have no idea what silent seasons they endured to get to the breakthrough you now envy. Use this time to forgive everyone who wounded you. Release every bitter root that has been growing in the soil of your heart, and cleanse your inner temple for the glory that is about to inhabit it. God cannot pour new wine into old wineskins, and this silent season is the stretching process that is preparing your vessel to contain blessings that would have previously burst you at the seams of capacity. Journal what God has already spoken to you in previous seasons, because the words he gave you then are still active now, still working, still accomplishing exactly what they were sent forth to accomplish. Do not allow the silence to convince you that God has changed his mind about you, because the gifts and callings of God are irrevocable, and what He promised in the light He will fulfill in the darkness. Stand on the written word when you cannot hear the spoken word. Let Scripture become your anchor when the storms of silence threaten to sweep you into the sea of despair and spiritual disorientation. The silence is almost over. The preparation is almost complete. The hidden season is approaching its divine conclusion. And you can feel in your spirit that something monumental is about to shift in the atmosphere. Everything that has been working against you is about to be exposed. Everything that has been stolen from you is about to be returned with interest. Everything that has been delayed is about to suddenly accelerate. The same God who has been silent is the same God who is about to roar like a lion over your circumstances. And when He speaks again, every enemy will scatter, and every obstacle will crumble. Do not panic in the final hour of your preparation. Do not give up at the 99th step when your breakthrough is waiting at the 100th step just beyond your current vision. Heaven has been recording every tear you have cried during this silent season, every prayer you have prayed, every sacrifice you have made, and the recompense is being calculated for imminent release. The God who promised is faithful. The God who started this work will complete it. And the same voice that spoke galaxies into existence will soon speak your breakthrough into visible, tangible, undeniable manifestation. When He breaks His silence over your life, the sound will be so loud and so clear that even your enemies will have to acknowledge that the Lord has done great things for you. Mountains that seemed immovable will suddenly move. Doors that seemed welded shut will suddenly swing open. And opportunities that seemed impossible will suddenly line up before you, like soldiers awaiting your command. The silence was never abandonment. It was always the sacred pause before the symphony begins, the held breath before the triumphant declaration, the calm before the breakthrough storm of unprecedented blessing. Hold on, hold fast, hold your ground, because the God who has been silent is about to speak, and when He does, every chapter of your pain will suddenly make sense in the light of His glorious purpose. Your instructions for this final hour are clear. Do not panic. Do not retreat. Do not abandon your post. And do not allow temporary silence to override eternal promises that were sealed with divine blood. Stand firm. Keep praying, even when you feel nothing. Keep worshiping, even when heaven seems distant. Keep believing, even when every natural circumstance screams that you are foolish for holding on to hope. The silence will break, the heavens will open, and you will understand that every silent moment was a sacred investment in the testimony you are about to share with a world desperate for hope. Get ready, for what is coming will require everything this silent season has developed in you. And you will thank God for every unanswered prayer that forced you to grow in ways comfort never could. Your story is not over. Your chapter is not closed. Your destiny is not canceled. And the God who began this work in you will be faithful to complete it unto the day of Christ. The silence was the womb, but the birth is approaching, and you are about to deliver dreams, visions, ministries, and purposes that were conceived in the hidden place of divine incubation and supernatural patience. Rise up from the ashes of your discouragement, shake off the dust of your disappointment, and prepare yourself for the entrance into a new season that will make this silent season worth every painful moment. God has not forgotten you. God has not forsaken you. God has not moved on to someone more worthy. And God has certainly not changed His mind about the beautiful destiny He designed for your life. The silence is sacred. The waiting is purposeful. The hiddenness is intentional. And every single second of this season has been counted and recorded by a Father who wastes absolutely nothing in your journey. When you look back on this season from the throne of your fulfilled purpose, you will weep with gratitude for the silence that protected you, prepared you, and positioned you for everything you are now walking in. Do not panic, child of God, for your Father has not left you. He has simply been working in the secret place on a surprise so magnificent that it required his temporary silence to complete. The silence is almost over, and what comes next will be worth everything you have endured, cried through, questioned, and almost gave up on, because your God is faithful and his timing is absolutely perfect.